Hey everyone, welcome back to the All Music Matters in That podcast. I'm your host, Brian, and today we'll go special guest and another bloke out of the Boston region. It's Nick, and he's from his own group. And pardon me if I say it wrong, but this is Metapersural. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Brian.
I was to say that wasn't kind of inspired by the whole "This is Sparta" quote from a 300 movie, was it?
Partially. Yeah, it has its, I wrote a lot of poetry when I was younger, and I did a lot of kind of classical language, Latin and Greek and just really pretty far out stuff, ancient language. And I coined that. I was thinking of metaphysics, but applied to the person and also in tune with nature. It might sound kind of silly, but I kind of liked it and I stuck with it. And it's certainly unusual, but people do get hung up on it. So maybe the next time around, I'll just call myself like Game Dog or something. That might be easier to say.
I guess. Actually, is it a legit word or is it is it like one of those Greek words you just happen to find?
Yeah, it's a combination of Greek. That's correct. So, my music is kind of like, because I did a lot of poetry when I was in my early days, and a lot of it was sort of classically based. So a lot of my music is sort of about, ancient times and also sort of philosophical, but also talking about people's struggles and how they can turn around any situation and make it better with, determination. So I kind of weave all that into my bizarre music.
Yeah, you did mention about the genre of music, I guess, psytrance,
Right.
EDM, and that sort of stuff.
When you work with these, music promotion places or what have you, when you launch a song, they have all sorts of genres. Originally, I thought this music was kind of alternative, but it really isn't, because I kind of drift towards more techno elements in it, and they have all sorts of flavors. I even I get frequently corrected saying that's not psytrance, that's electronica, and I'm like, okay, whatever you want to call it. but psytrance is just that sort of like psychedelic, and it's got trance elements. So some of my songs definitely hit that kind of trance spirit. It kind of takes you somewhere else, and then I combine it with these, pretty far out videos. I do that with, I do the videos because that's a great backdrop to the music, like if it's in a show or a club or something like that. But I take great enjoyment, and I didn't know I was a videographer. but but anyway, I kind of put a lot of trippy stuff in there, and I reckon that these days people probably could use a lot of psychedelic.
It's the right kind of psychedelic. So
Yeah. So, any questions? Go right ahead.
well, I think we'll tie it with the music here, which we'll just get to in a little bit. But I guess what you been up to recently? I guess you just been releasing some new tunes, or I guess what you've been doing.
Yeah, I'm surprisingly, I've gotten comments. I've been on other radio shows, and they say, Nicholas, your music is more like compositions, some sort of trippy version of like a Bach cantata. It's got, I find when I listen to, like, there's one show on YouTube that this guy reviews all the latest top rated Spotify songs. Personally, I don't find any substance there. And I think a lot of people are looking to get away from sort of the same old, auto-tuned. And, in the past, I was a bass player. I always wanted to play Cali Roots, but I couldn't find anybody here who would play it. So they play these, retreads of 90s and, 90s songs. So that doesn't really appeal to me. And I say, life is short. Why not just go all out and wherever it takes you? So I really feel like Metapersural has a a muse. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm composing it, music theory, what I want. Usually the songs have many, many layers, but I kind of have a formula already. But sometimes it just surprises me. And I say that's got to be a muse because I don't know where the hell that came from. But early on, I was just starting with electronic music. I've been playing in all sorts of bands, bass and a social distortion cover band, some reggae, music, and of course, endless Rolling Stone songs like "Honky Tonk Woman," where I was about to lose my mind. But yeah, but anyway, early on, I just started off and I said, "God damn, this music is really hitting on something." And it's kind of a little bit like ancient and just a little bit unnerving. And much to my surprise, right out of the gate, one of my songs in early days got picked up by the Spotify editorial, and it was put on, new Friday dance and new electronic music. I'm like, how the heck did that happen? And it also got put on, workout playlists. I didn't know I was doing workout playlists. And actually, I really am not a big fan of that song. You got it. So recently, it comes in bursts. But I have to say that every musician, you kind of have quantum leaps, cognitive leaps. All of a sudden, I've walked into something. And it's almost there. It's almost like the latest song I did definitely has elements that could be, very danceable or, appealing, high energy. But it is trippy. And maybe that's not for everyone. They may want, your emotional songs. Well, I write the lyrics too. And frequently, and especially in my recent songs, it's about, narcissism, egotism, letting go of ego. And, I don't try to be preachy, but I got elements in there. And I think the lyrics are fairly snappy. So, but this is still a niche. If you want to appeal to a larger audience as a musician with how many 65,000 songs coming on every day in Spotify world, that's a lot of competition. But surprisingly, people like what I do. It's not Taylor Swift levels, but it really surprises me. And, they like the videos too. So, lately, a lot of my songs have been, they are compositions, and I labor mightily on it. I basically taught myself sound engineering and music engineering. And then, because I also have a software development background, I started writing music plugins for like different DAWs, as they call them. Horrible word. And I found that some of my things custom made are better than what I find out there. So, it's a tremendously creative process. But, I've gotten away from the, more like bass string instruments where I can do pretty much everything on a few synthesizers. And yeah, I have an African drum. I've got some really weird Middle Eastern instruments, which I'm trying to learn how to play. Sometimes my music, it's been commented, it sounds a little bit Middle Eastern. And I really like that. So this is a little background.
It's general background, yeah. And actually, I did tie in with the first question here, but just to kind of do a little introduction here, I just want to welcome you, Nick, to my podcast. And I do want to ask you some more questions. And I want to get to know you more, both as the individual, but also as a musician as well here, too. So,
of course.
All right. So you did mention about some of the stuff you kind of did, I guess, teenage years. I'm not sure if you did anything during times with your kid when the parents were trying to push you to play like strings or brass instruments. So I guess start at the beginning right there. So
right.
I guess start at the beginning. Go ahead.
Well, I'm a relative old timer, though I don't feel like one. I grew up in Greenwich Village at a time when my parents were around a lot of pretty famous jazz musicians and writers, Miles Davis, you name it. But it was of that era. But, my father owned some bars. And as a kid, frequently I was out at inappropriate hours. But I was exposed to a lot of music. So, for example, my mother's boyfriend was this drummer, Barry Altschul, who, played with a lot of kind of fusion jazz, and also Larry Coryell, who was my father's friend. So I had a lot of, I always loved music at a very deep level. And, so much so that, I'm giving away my age. My stepfather said, "Oh, Nicholas, at age 6, I'll give you a little record player, and here's Janis Joplin, which was acid rock, But what it taught me is I got very wide musical tastes. So, I kind of was doing drumming at that time, but it was later. I got a very strange start in music, really, because I started playing, of all things, the Irish flute. And I was playing in, here in Cambridge. They'd have 30 people all playing the, penny whistles and Irish flute. And I started to be able to read music. And I kind of very self-educated. So that's just a little bit where I was coming from musically. And, then again, I also played it as a bass player for about 15 years. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask the bass player, I guess, were you just in cover bands or did you guys do original material?
Cover bands, I wanted to do original material. A lot of people, because they're not full-time professional, it's sort of a weekend warrior thing, and you play out like twice or, twice, maybe twice a month or something like this, because, it's quite a job packing and unpacking and repacking. And by the time I got back at home, it was like 4 a.m. and I had children. So a lot of it, I find a lot, I don't mean to be overly judgmental, but I find people kind of stay to the familiar. And, why? So, I got to a point, I was playing in one cover band, which was just traditional classic rock kind of thing. And I got really bored with it. So I started playing some reggae bass riffs, and they had no clue I was doing this, and I take as inspiration some of the great reggae greats, bass players like Sly, Robbie Shakespeare just died. And during COVID, I made a course for myself where I just went over James Jamerson and Robbie Shakespeare and playing some pretty nasty, kind of reggae music, where it's got a real driving beat and, dead notes, and it sort of breathes. But a lot of people find that alien. Now, I had a friend years ago who played at a local famous bar here, the Western Front, and he was a reggae player. And he wasn't black, but big deal, right? But, people started punching him out, like, get off the stage, you don't belong there. And, you run into some of that too. But I really, my inspiration when I wanted to play and try to organize bands to play here is Cali Roots. It's sort of a mixture of a Grateful Dead and roots reggae. So that's what appealed to me. But I've been in some very strange projects, like a Social Distortion cover band. And they're out of California, and they have songs like, Sick Boy, just kind of, nervy kind of punk rock. So.
I also know about the song Story of My Life, which was the first one I heard it from, Social Distortion.
Yes. That's a great song.
That one sounded more like a traditional classic rock too, especially just the way the beat kind of went. It didn't really struck me as like a punk rock sort of song.
Yeah, they're kind of, a bit of rockabilly thrown in, So, but it's so fun to play that kind of music. And, sure, you want to make people dance, playing traditional classical music. And some of the songs that I played were jazz numbers. So, I can walk the bass and play jazz kind of bass. But then one time I was playing out with this band where the band leader was an alcoholic. And by the third set was smashed. That didn't go very well. But, some woman came up and said, "That's not the way you play that country song." So, musicians are quirky to say the least. And they're difficult, can be difficult. So trying to own my own original projects is like herding cats. And, these days people don't show up to practice, rehearsals, sessions. "Oh, I'm so into it, man." And then you never hear from them again. So, unless you're a professional, then, you get leaned on a little bit more.
We need the money. That's what we need.
Yeah, we need money.
Yeah. So otherwise, I think you're a homeless guy next before you know it.
Yeah, but just watching some of these shows on YouTube about how much music is manufactured, and then people ask me, "Well, are your vocals AI?" And I say, "No, they're my own voice." And I've come to evolve with my vocals, and much to my surprise, my girlfriend was a former jazz singer. My voice has actually evolved, that I'm actually rather pleased with it. And I don't do all the auto-tuney stuff,
I wonder if that came after some action in the bed later.
Yes, indeed.
So I just joke with you, but you're okay. So.
That's okay. I'm not offended.
It's all right. Actually, I always think of the Falcor and Lakewards for a scene where he's talking about you'll hit the band over the head with like a mallet. That comes later. So not exactly worded like that, but you get the idea. So, all right. In this case, let's go ahead and jump into this is Metapersural. So I guess this is a relatively new project, or has this been going on for some time?
I have been doing this for 4 years. And, I have to say, there's so many great musicians out there. And, I always amazed how they, parade all these people on the top. And yet you have so much good music right now. And I've been lucky because people actually save my music. And I don't have a big marketing budget or, associated with a label or anything like that. So, it's a slow process to really get people involved. And the good news is lately, when I promote something, put a new song out there, they also post it on YouTube. And I'm surprised that I'm starting to get a following there. So, getting away from formulaic, there's nothing formulaic about Metapersural. It's kind of like seizes you and puts you into another world, which I delight in. And, why should things be predictable? You want to make people kind of think and put them in a different zone. So, a lot of the, traditional techno, even that gets a little boring, but there's some great bands like Klangphonics out of Germany, where they're always creative. Their music is really great. And they were classically trained. So, Metapersural is about 3.5, 4 years. And I told you I had like a blast of initial success. I found out my song was being played, which was so strange. It was being played in Berlin at like raves. And it's like a big festival in the Dominican Republic.
Room, party starter.
Yeah. And I'm like, I couldn't get my head around that. Like, that's the modern age, You don't even know where your music's being played. So, I had some early success. And a lot of that music was, I had this kind of weird creative ambition to kind of reflect on ancient times. So I had a series of songs that were about, Rome, Marius, this creepy ass general, and falls, and it's very dramatic. And it comes out, it's kind of like a little bit unnerving, the sounds I was coming out with. And, sometimes I'll use a very low bass frequency, just the right so it doesn't hurt. But it's just like, it creates this kind of weird mood. So, I've really been experimenting. And I did purchase recently an instrument called a zurna, which comes from the Middle East. It's got a reed. Oh my God, the thing is loud and it's hard to play. You have to learn your embrasure. But whenever I blow this thing, my dogs run away. Like, oh God, he's at it again. I mean, it's enough to wake up the dead. But I really like some of the Middle Eastern scales and, just switch it up and kind of maybe a little bit of time travel in it. Easier said than done.
Got to be like Lazarus being raised from the dead.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. Lazarus. Yeah, that's a good one. Of course, Sodom and Gomorrah has been covered many times. Who's the Steel Pulse had a song called Sodom and Gomorrah. So, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll try Lazarus next. I did do some Gnostic stuff, Gnostic Christian, which sounds really far out. It's just, why not open yourself to creativity and explore? Because there's so much more to the eye or ear than one can imagine. I might mention that another musical influence, for a while was living, when I was a boy, living in upstate Connecticut in this old inn. And my stepmother at the time was a very, very good classically trained pianist. She didn't realize that her piano was directly under my bed on the top floor. And I would be hearing Chopin at 12 in the morning, So I come upon it honestly with all these musical influences.
I guess this could be like a two-part question here. Was getting into Metapersural, I guess, so what really motivated you to take up the project? And I guess, what were you doing before you formed Metapersural? Were you just working on your main job?
You mean professionally? I've done a lot of software.
The software developer, yeah.
Yeah, in software engineering and stuff like that. So, but also I studied ancient languages and stuff like that. And, it's true that a lot of musicians come from an engineering math background because you can see the patterns and things, and I think that really helps. But your question again is just what inspired me to do this?
Because it sounded like, if I'm getting my years right, it sounded like it was like 3.5, 4 years. So it sounded like it happened during 2021 during COVID.
Yeah, pretty much around that time. And, I have relatives who were in New York and, many people died that I knew. And in the meantime, I don't know what happened to me. I also practice Buddhism. And I was getting out a lot because I live in a more suburban place. I was feeling really happy while everybody else was miserable. And all of a sudden, all this creative juice that was blocked up inside of me, writing sort of classical poetry, but I had had enough of cover bands and people really not wanting to do that many originals. When, why not? It's just that it's maybe the nature of the music scene here. It's not New York. And there's more of a happening music presence in Providence, Rhode Island, strangely. So maybe that's changing now, but it's mostly like hip hop or stuff like that. So I got, I just said, I'd like to return because I did play some piano and I just got bored and there was no place to play. My bandmates played at an Irish, bar, a dive. And I said, that's not wise because we're now in COVID. And they went and they played anyway, but that's them. But I think it just really dawned on me that there was so much more I could do musically. And, I've got a kind of creative, imaginative mind. So I come upon it honestly. So many of these bands, they have a very set list. And if the band leader might just say, no, it's my way or the highway. So, not everybody's friendly. They have a certain product that they want to deliver, So I did some songs like with one band. There were some songs I liked, like I played, Tennessee Whiskey, which was we recorded a cover of that. And I rather enjoyed those kind of songs. Some of the earlier stuff, it's pretty cool. I like Motown, James Jameson, and of course jazz. So, I've got a real hybrid mix going here.
He keeps himself busy. So,
absolutely.
All right. And on a serious note, sorry for any friends and family you lost along the way during COVID there too.
Thank you.
No worries. So, have you lived in Boston a good chunk of your life? Because it sounds like you've kind of been around a little bit, or you just...
I have lived in Boston a big portion of my life. I grew up in New York City originally, and as a child, my mother, was kind of a jet setter. That's what they used to call it. I don't know what they call it now, but she would, take me to all these pretty wild places like Tunisia and Morocco, and I was just a little kid. So I had a lot of exposure to, as a child, very exposed to perhaps too much adult behavior. So, I guess I was precocious in a way, but, I had interest in music. It just makes me so happy. And, just all the kinds of flavors and intensity. So when my girlfriend sings, she's got really great projection. She'll blast you out of the room. And she's bigger, so she's got this, amazing voice. And I'm like, I can't sing like that. But I'm surprised how much my vocals are really starting to blend in. And it's I'm not tooting my own horn, but sometimes actually it's a fairly pleasant voice, much to my surprise. And I'm not singing out of key. That's even more amazing.
Guess all those vocal times, if you're a girl there, actually paid off. So.
That's right.
So, all right. But still sticking with COVID, I guess, have you played at any shows or gone to any concerts recently? And how's the music scene been in around Boston from your perspective?
Boston is very hard to crack. So, like, if you wanted to do techno or this kind of music, there are some new clubs, amazingly. And I, because I work like in the studio so much, so to speak. But my intention is to start, putting together a media package, and it's not easy. But there are a few places that kind of favor techno. Otherwise, the music scene here is not doing very well. And I'm talking even, about more traditional music. So if you're trying to make money at it, I have a friend who's a professional, stand-up bass player. And he plays at a famous jazz place here, Scullers. But, he struggles. So, unless you got a lot of connections, it's hard. Now, my stepbrother is in a band called Run the Jewels. And that's a very well-known band. And, he worked very hard to get there. He had a heroin addiction, all sorts of stuff. And now they played a huge crowds, like 20, 30,000 people. And they played at Boston Calling. I've never hit him up like, oh, can you help me out? I'd rather come upon it honestly. But it does help to have connections. And, many people have approached me more for like games and commercials, what they call sync promotions, where you could actually make yourself a good 20 grand by getting your thing, on an NFL commercial. But, I'm working at it.
That's good. And I have interviewed a couple people around the Boston area. There was Axminster. There's a guy named Michael Kabetsky who I interviewed, who's mainly just we call him the coffee shop musician because he just goes in with his acoustic guitar and just starts playing that sorts of stuff.
That's awesome. I hope he makes some money at it.
He's doing something, so he's still
Yeah.
got a roof over his head, so it's working. So
Yeah, it's like, what do you call it? A love of labor, or a labor of love. There we go. It is a labor of love, because even I saw this show with it was more reggae, and it's called Culture, and the original frontman died, and it was his son, and they were playing at the Sinclair local club. They only had about 150 people in the audience. And and they had a whole full band set up, and they gave 4 hours of music. But it's not an easy thing to do. People think, oh, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be a great guitarist, or and the reality is you have to do a lot of setup and hustling. So that's not for the faint of heart. It's hard to support a family on that. But I feel confident that I will, have some sort of sync breakthrough. And, I'm perfectly happy that the music will speak for itself.
I would say the YouTube channel link it's sent over for a one music video. I subscribed, so you got an extra.
Yay! I got a subscriber to that one. Yeah, I just put that out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess speaking of which, let's go and jump into that. I don't know how many songs you actually sent me. I just got to the one. It was the Drop the Ego, Homie. So I guess
Yeah. Drop the ego, homie. That's right.
I guess go ahead, delve into that. I guess what's it about?
Yeah. So I did one song that was really well received, and it was after the recent elections. And I'm not going to get political here, but the drop the ego thing, I study a lot of philosophy and stuff like that. And, clearly people kind of live in the lower worlds, like animality, hunger, whatever. And the Buddhists have a funny word for it. They call it gas, which is greed, anger, and stupidity. So that's really what the song is about. It's like, if you're going to screw people over because you can't get a handle on yourself, it's just not going to end up well for you. So it was a political song this time, masked under some bizarre kind of music, but that's the feeling I'm trying to show. And I had another song which was fairly catchy and was also somewhat political, but most of the things are about people relations. And they're not, love songs, though I could try one of those. That's right. That's amore.
I just want to make love to you. So yeah.
That's right. But I could have a pun there. That's amore eel rather than that's amore.
I guess what's the difference? Because it doesn't sound like the other one. It's like the one doesn't sound like we want to make love to you or something. It's more like something bad's about to happen.
Yeah.
Swap, whatever. But
yeah. So oddly, people do like these songs. It's just, as an independent, you have to have a lot of connections and word of mouth. And, I had been working a day job, so it's a little hard to do all that hustling. But, I feel that I'm on the right path, because much to my surprise, it's, just the kind of, apparently a lot of music trends, they want to hear, more layers in the music, not the same, traditional stuff. That's what I've been picking up on. So if you have a really distinct sound, it's quirky enough. But I have to say, a lot of the music out there that I listen to on the top, even techno, it's great. It gets you going, but it doesn't go anywhere. That's just my personal opinion. So yeah. I've been, highly productive. I think, I work on a song like every 2 weeks. And apparently, a lot of these streaming services like to see that. I just do it naturally. And, I have a wisp of an idea. Sometimes it's the lyrics, and it just comes over me. So So I guess I'm pretty highly prolific, but the results remain to be seen.
Because I was like, detach and then insert here. So yeah,
Yeah.
insert idea right here. So yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm a night owl, and often these creative inspirations happen to me at like 12 midnight when you're supposed to be normal and go to bed, for Christ's sakes. But not me. And then sometimes something will work out right off the bat. And then other times I know it needs more work. And then you go back in and you say, no, this got to change. You end up screwing up the whole song. So, there are a lot of creative barriers to writing music and trying to just make it just right. And then there's a certain point of no return. So, at one point I thought maybe I should just make the music simpler. And I tried that. It didn't work for me. There's a lot to be said for an old Motown song or some of the songs from the 50s with great harmonies and, more class than what you see today. But, I don't think I can do that. I could play it on the bass, but it's not really where I'm going creatively.
Yeah. Unless we just crossed over the PG to the PG-13 rating right there.
That's right. I might as well just stamp my song covers with, restricted language in this, NC-17.
I should know it's like those death metal covers, for instance, where you say blood, gore, or something like that.
Yeah.
They'll put the sticker down, it'd be like explicit content. It'd be like, well, no shit. It's pretty much gore and some other crazy stuff like what you see with Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah, that's right. I might as well, some of these musicians kind of inject, but I'm not into the whole twerking thing or, like I like hip hop up to a degree, but then it starts to grate on me. That's not really what turns me on. But you can, some of my lyrics are quite punchy. And I had one song about, you're a twat and that's enough. But that's about as far as I got with that song.
People are going to think you're British at that point. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's a British word, isn't it?
Actually, I think they always pronounce it excuse my language too, but it's also a little funny. But there was an instance where a guy was driving a motorcycle a little too fast and he kind of crashed and kind of wiped out a little bit. Not seriously, but maybe a little shook up. But you just hear one guy go, "You fucking twat." So,
absolutely. The British are very funny. Well, I also heard, I wanted to use this C.U.N.T for a song. Can't understand normal thinking. But, that's probably a little too edgy.
People are going to assume that you were saying the C word.
Yeah, don't say that. The worst word in humanity.
And yeah, you heard it like so many times on Game of Thrones. So we basically, Mommy, I learned a new language. So yeah.
That's right. I don't speak English. I just speak Arabic, French. I don't know what that word means. But, it's kind of like some of the political figures, it's about shocking people. Well, that has its place, but not all the time, So, yeah, that's my position on that.
I'm going to say you still have the punk rock details. I know you mentioned about the Social Distortion cover band earlier, but did you do any other punk rock outside of Social Distortion back then?
It was mostly Social Distortion. I grew up in the punk rock era. Now I was coming like from progressive rock. And then this girlfriend of mine at the time said, what are you listening to that crap for? You should be listening, to the Jam, one of my favorites, or, the Buzzcocks, just really in your face. And I was listening to this kind of obscure punk band, and you definitely, it was on YouTube, and it's called Here Come the Drums. And they got that whole audience, body surfing up on the stage with them, and it's so in your face. And I have a bit of that rebellious nature, so I do appreciate that.
I tend to wonder if you were traumatized when you heard like the Exploited or maybe Sex Pistols. I don't know if you ever got into them.
Oh yeah.
And then Misfits.
Oh yeah. I kind of like that music. I mean, it's just like, or even the, the Ramones, she's going to be sedated. I mean, that's pretty right on by my book. Now, I went to this college called Bard College. It's a very artsy school at the time. And they had, way back when, they had elements of Steely Dan who went there. Really great musicians. And I used to go to the studio in Woodstock, New York, Bear Studios, and a lot of those musicians floating around. But I also happened to see the Voidoids at that time, and they were singing way back when. There was a song, the Patty Duke Show. So they would just take old, TV, soundtracks and themes and put them into punk rock, and it worked every time. So, it's like, who says, who cares, so what, why not? Music is meant to be creative and be forceful. So that's what I believe. Now you have the Phil Spector wall of sound from way back when. And actually in one of my songs, I managed to reproduce the Phil Spector wall of sound, just so wide and rich. And, but anyway, that's my story.
Actually, I thought that it would be like the deafening sort of sound you get with like Motorhead, because I heard some people say like how loud they used to be.
Oh, yeah.
Just be booming, the house be jumping and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, when animals run for cover because they're vibrating too much. I mean, there's that apocryphal story of a band way back when in Madison Square Garden, Nectar. And they had this song, Love Hurts. That was one of their big songs. But they used so much wattage that they blew out like 10 city blocks. And when you start seeing blood come out of your ears, that might be a little dangerous.
Yeah, I probably should back away, to be honest, or try to get earplugs. So
yeah. So
I don't know what this juice is coming out of my ear, but it feels so right, man. So
I've had many experiences playing with guys who really like to play loudly. And it's, I played in a metal band at one point. And it was not screamo, but it was metal. And these guys were really good, but they didn't write anything down. And there's all this sort of stop and go, like a machine gun. And they really liked me. And I said, I have no idea what you're playing. But then you get these dudes who get these huge, huge speaker systems. And they play at top volume, but they wear earplugs. I'm like, really? You begin to get some, resonance when you play that loud. And then you can't hear anything. So I would have to say I've met every possible musical character possible. And
I would say it was like the Frank Zappa of the metal scene, to be honest.
Yeah. So I was getting this reggae thing going with this guy from Jamaica, a good drummer. He's kind of a shrimpy guy. And, playing with this guy who ran some sort of chop shop or something, and a few other musicians in this really derelict place. And this guy was so stoned. I mean, I don't know how he could play. And then he fell down like two sets of stairs. Like, are you alive down there? So anyway, my music is just like Metapersural. It's kind of metaphysical, and it's about, it could be about stoicism, philosophical stuff in there, but it does take you somewhere. And I really, I have to do a lot of beat design, what works. And, I have a chart of like 200 different beat patterns for different styles of electronic, and I lay those out on a drum machine or a synth. And it's hard. I find that to be the hardest part, is to get a good beat and, something that really drives and is catchy enough. And so anyway, that's a very common issue.
Yeah. I get the challenges in just a sec, but delve into the lyrics. It seems like you do encompass a whole lot of the philosophy. So was philosophy like a minor when you were in college?
And no, I studied ancient languages, believe it or not. Greek and Latin and Sanskrit and computational linguistics. Like I say to people what my major is, and they say, "What?" But I got a lot of, the Romans were really fascinating, and they were advanced, and they had so much underhanded crap going on. I mean, it's like you can't even make this stuff up. So I bring elements of that into it, Greek mythology, or sort of the hero kind of, image, that sort of stuff. But if you get too preachy in your music, people don't like it. So, but that's where so basically my lyrics now are more, based on my girlfriend's advice. It's more like, not super lengthy, just the right blend. So anyway, but I've gotten quite, I've had to teach myself mixing and music production. I'm actually getting pretty good at it. So I get people who write me say, "Hey, could you mix my song?" And there was this one like blues rock band. They said, "Yeah, we're techno ambient." I said, "No, you're not." And I gave them a bunch of suggestions like, if you want to sound electronic, you really have to do these things. So there are a lot of people out there who have good song creations, but their mixing is terrible. So, the vocals don't sit in the mix right, or you have too much crackling or resonance. So, basically I taught myself, and I write music plugins. So I wrote a music plugin called Mr. Multivox, and it's got like 10 different settings of EDM voices, like super low, and that was really hard to do, but I was quite proud of it. So sometimes I use that.
It doesn't say he was tooting his own horn right there. So, so, and actually, you had mentioned about Buddhism earlier. I guess you still kind of study it, or was it just kind of a topic to research?
Yes, I have practiced Buddhism for 40 years. And, I kind of was always interested in it, and it kind of factors in my music too. Like there's this oracle that's 3,000 years old. It's called the Book of Changes of I Ching. And, you roll some coins in a certain order, and it basically serves as sort of spiritual guidance. It never lies. I'm surprised people don't use it more often, but it's very fundamental to Chinese culture. But then also I practice what's called the Lotus Sutra, is that, people have the power inside of themselves to, reach a form of enlightenment and real happiness and purity. But it's a bear to practice because you have to do it twice a day. And if you get busy, like with everything else you're trying to do, maybe I could clone myself. I wish I could. But so that's been a real underpinning for me. And the right relationship to the universe. And I think that drives somewhat of what I try to do in the music. But it's more like my songs are more like a kind of down and out person who finds themselves and then can change their outcome. I don't know. I keep returning to that kind of, down and out kind of, stuff.
I think people like to mistake Buddhism as another way to get high. So it seems like, or like eating like the so-called mushrooms that would give you like that psychedelic sort of experience.
Yeah, well, it can be transcendent. Yeah, I mean, you could definitely get in the zone, but this particular Buddhism, unfortunately, is very action oriented. It's like, hi there, you're unhappy, do something about it. You just don't lay around and meditate. You pray, for wisdom. But it's a very active form. It's Japanese Buddhism. So, it's not, you're going to come back and, or there's no hope for you. you're just going to come back. It's the same thing, perhaps even less, like a dog or cockroach. I mean, I like dogs. Forget about dogs, but like a cockroach, you know, or a parasite, a leech. Well, the Buddhism I practice doesn't believe in that. You know, it is what it is, and whatever causes you make through your thoughts and actions and words all comes back to bite you, or you find true happiness. So, you know, life is short, and even with this Metapersural project, I'm kind of trying to go to somewhere different, you know, and whatever that is.
Say, Nick, wait, don't fly off to the light. So
Yeah. Now, sometimes this is really kind of humorous. You know how people listen to like Taylor Swift songs or stuff and they say, God damn, this is so profound. And like when you realize that they're just songwriters, like professional songwriters who just generate this stuff. Well, what I'll do like frequently is I'll finish a song, I'll wrap it up, and then I'll also work laboriously on a video. And then, you know, you might have some, you know, some aid to get you into a better zone. And there I am listening to my own music. And one night I said, this is so profound. I'm like, wait a minute, dude, that's called self-referential. But I have one friend who really likes my videos. And, you know, she's got a lot of pain. She's got physical pain. She was in a car crash. And she says the videos I make with all the colors and, you know, the sort of kaleidoscope effect and trippy stuff actually soothes her. So maybe there's some medical benefits in it.
I can see it now. Metapersural insurance. There we go.
That's right. Metapersural insurance.
Yes.
For those in doubt. That's right.
Nick is your guy. So yeah.
That's right.
That's good.
Yeah.
So, but I guess going to jump into that in terms of videos. I guess this one will be sort of a two-parter. I guess first off, did you make it yourself, or was it AI generated? And then, what do you make of AI and social media these days?
Right. So my videos are not AI. You know, I have a method to my madness, but they're all my original photos or things I take. I might take something in nature, like a nice meadow, and I'll make it sort of trippy. But you know, it's all my own creation. Now, some of the tools I use AI assisted stuff, like the effects are probably programmed with AI. But it's entirely my own thing. You know, I never had any luck with you know, AI generated videos. And when you go on YouTube and you hear the same goddamn, you know, AI studio narrator, it's either an English dude or some, you know, guy who's had too much like Red Bull, you know, like it's like, you know, and then, you know, it's just bloated. YouTube has tons of these things. So, you know, and then you have AI in music production. You have things like Sumo or, you know, artificial voices, things like this. Now, when I'm lacking a backing vocalist, I don't necessarily have to use AI. I can just use algorithms, you know, in a plugin to get that chorus effect. But, you know, on occasion, I'll use a tool, songs. I forgot what it's called, Songster or something like this, and it provides like 20 canned voices, male and female, different ranges, different breadth. And you know, when I use it, very seldom does it sound good. There's something about it that just isn't, you know, satisfying. Sounds like it's canned. You know, and then people take AI and then they use AI humanizers to try to make it sound like it's real. And then you just have to say, why don't you just learn to goddamn play the keyboard? It would take you less effort instead of prompting some machine. Just learn how to play, you know? So it's a point of absurdity. And now, you know, Spotify doesn't like all the AI music because they're getting into it themselves. They're generating hits, like this guy, is it Woman Murphy or something? It was totally AI generated. So, but that will bite people because they're going to just say this sounds so wooden and soulless, and it lacks that creative spark. So I'm a purist mostly. If there's something that AI can trick out, okay, I'll use it. But I'm not trying to preach. I'm just saying I find AI tools in music, at least, not very great. Now, some of the mastering tools that are out there are AI, and that saves you a lot of time because mastering is a bear. So I use one from Lander just to, if I think there's stuff I'm not catching with resonant frequencies, and sometimes it can take care of the mixing better, mastering. And is that a cheat? Well, not really, because it's your own idea and you're just using a tool that can save you a lot of time. So that's my attitude about it. But it does infuriate me going on Facebook and you can be an instant musician. There's no effort. Well, you can also, like everything else you do in your life, it's all about convenience. Is that what you want for music? Convenience? I'm a great songwriter. And I go to Sumo and I get a prompt from Claude and I get the lyrics and I then prompt Sumo with my lyrics and I have a song in 3 minutes. But it's I would say, like, even lyric wise or music wise, the quality at its best is sort of middle. I don't think you'll hear, really great music, but I could be wrong. It saves a lot of labor and, they don't have to pay musicians. So, it's a freaky time, but maybe, if enough real musicians pull together and get out of the whole Spotify trap, that maybe that will happen.
Eventually.
Yeah.
It's almost like the quote. It was the best of times.
Yeah.
The times.
Times. Yeah. You could try to promote your music like through merch, or, indie promotions. But, for any musicians out there who are, there's some dude out there who says, I'm going to teach you this thing called Hype Edit, where you'll learn through AI and automated promotion how you'll crack the algorithm. And I actually said, okay, I'll see what it's all about. And you have to be a goddamn software engineer to understand how the thing works and understand all about Facebook, which is got the most monstrous setup for running ads. So, there's no easy solution for people looking for convenience. It's just sheer persistence. But like your friend, at the coffee shop, I guess what I'd like to do is a pop-up, psytrance session with the lights and all that. I haven't quite figured out all the equipment I need and the, battery truck they'd have to have running in the background. I mean, power is an issue.
About the political, but in this case, the physical sort of power to get the lights to work. So
yeah, I mean, the lighting systems and the whole thing, you need some hefty horsepower. You can't run off of, 12-volt batteries. You need a generator or something. But anyway, if you're smart enough, you could, be a, what do they call it? Bucksters. Is that right? The people that go to the subway.
Yeah, the ones that play on the streets. That's
yeah.
Yeah, Buckster. I thought it was like busking or something like that.
Busking.
So yeah. Gotta work out your busking skills there, Nikki. So
that's right. I'll play some nice quiet music, and all of a sudden I'll blast their socks off so they fall into the train tracks.
just figure some gruesome details afterwards. So, yeah. So, all right, but just real quick, what social media are you on so people can check you out and interact?
Right. So, I'm on all the streaming services like, Spotify, Apple Music, the one founded by Alicia Keys, Tidal, which has got great sound quality, but not enough people use it. I'm on YouTube with videos and YouTube Vivo Video, which is a music channel. And, sometimes I post to Facebook and stuff like that. And I have a Metapersural, but I also have this venture where I do music plugins. And that's named after a Roman, Tully. It's called Tully EDM Vibe, where I write I write bizarre plugins, and people say, "Sir, are you still working at Tully EDM Vibe?" Okay, yes, I am. So, yeah, that's
Present.
my side gig.
I wonder what people would have thought of if you had named it Commodus, from like Gladiator.
Well, some of my earliest creations were a song about Marius, and then another one about Cicero, and Sulla, and all these people were murderous. They basically treated people like toilet paper. So, but there's something about it that is, the Romans had a word for it, gravitas. They mean business. So I try to capture some of that, and bizarrely enough, in techno songs.
Now you make me wonder how your song for like Caligula would be then.
Yeah, Caligula. Oh, yeah. And his name, Caligula, when he was a little boy, he would hang out with all the soldiers. His father was Germanicus, and he wore military boots. So they called him Little Booties, which is in Latin, Caligula. Little booties who like to, decapitate people and have sex with his sister. So,
those are good times. Yeah, those are good times.
Really great times, let me tell you.
Let me tell you, I made out with my
blood and everything else going on was just great.
They were the Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones was the thing.
So, that's right.
So, all right, and just two more questions, then we can jump to the extra fun ones. I guess first off, let's go and jump to the gear. So I think you mentioned a couple the bits you have right there, but I guess what else you got to make the magic happen?
Right. So I have played with different like real traditional synthesizers with the cables and patches. I find that to be a bit much for what I'm doing. So I have two synths. One is a Korg and the other is a Moog. And, this particular Korg is really great with sequencing and layering. It's a rather unusual synthesizer. But otherwise, I use your traditional, Arturia, Keylab and stuff like that, and a variety of drum machines, particularly from Arturia, and other step sequencers. And it's not a $200,000 or $500,000 thing. It's more modest, but I'm able with all the plugins and my own to pretty much do what I need. And with engineering help and all the mixing skills I now have, it sounds pretty awesome. But it's not a hugely complex synthesizers on top of synthesizers. It's just enough. And I have some really odd things like this thing here, which is a mini controller where you could be in the other room, playing, your synthesizer through this remote device. It's called the Noise. It's a little baby controller with Bluetooth. And I'm like, okay, whatever gadgets come along, I like them.
I shall name it Mini Me. So,
yeah. I also have this controller called the Roly Seaboard Rise. It's very expressive. It's got a kind of a rubbery surface, and traditional pianists they'll create these warpy sounds by tricks, but this thing allows you to really stretch notes, and also their sound packs are excellent. They're virtual instruments. So that's what I basically use. I occasionally introduce an African drum. I have I hope I pronounce this right, a djembe drum, which is rather, it takes some practice. And occasionally I use whistles or a flute. So, kind of a jack of all trades.
It keeps itself busy. Plus with that Middle Eastern stuff there too. So yeah.
Yeah, I got this weird Zurn, and I wouldn't dare blow your ears out now. But it can be a lovely instrument. And I would, going forward, I might look at more, Turkish, or what is it? The scale is different. What appeals to Middle Eastern music is very different. And it really, it's got a real underpinning and some really ancient music. So I'm going to kind of lean that way.
All right. Can't wait to see what you got there too. So, and I guess for the last question here, before we jump into extra fun ones, what's been your challenges being this is Metapersural these days?
Right. The challenges for an independent musician are that there's so much coming at people these days. So many inputs and stuff like that. They may like your music one time and say, "Oh, that's pretty cool," and put it on a playlist. But most musicians, I mean, like typically when I release a song, I get like maybe 7% actually end up saving that, and that's actually considered a very good rate. But most people struggle mightily to get the recognition, and it might be that they've got a sound that at least these algorithms say, "Nah, I don't think people will want to put that on repeat." So that's a challenge. It's like you really have to understand what they're looking for if you want to be big on that. But it's the biggest challenge is obviously promotion, but also what I see for myself and many similar people is the production quality. And you can be your own studio up to a point, and I've done pretty well, but I think that's a big challenge. So as I mentioned earlier, occasionally if someone will come and say, "Can you mix my song?" It's that, you're mixing and stuff like that sounds great, but they don't have those skills. So they end up with, crappy sounding demos. So that's what I've seen. But for me, the biggest struggle is, persistence. And, maybe this does, I mean, I do it for myself mostly, but I also want to appeal to people that they'd want to listen to it, obviously. But it's just the marketing. So if you were rich and you had 50 grand you wanted to spend on marketing, you could do that, and and hire go to a management thing, a manager. But I think many musicians, they're just not there yet. So, it's like Sisyphus pushing a rock up the hill. That's right.
It's a good God idea break. So yeah.
I have a friend who's more classical jazz singer, and she won some songwriting contest, independent songwriting contest. I said, "Well, what did they give you for a prize?" They gave her nothing. I'm sorry, that's not really a prize. How about like
recognition? There we go. We spread your name out to the world. So yeah.
About a year's worth of studio time. Now that would be good. But there's many great musicians out there, particularly like with Cali roots music. That the music is awesome, and am I surprised to see why they're not more popular? So the point is, don't get discouraged.
I guess so, but check carefully, as well as also with the AI. There's stuff there too. So
yeah, I'd be very careful with AI. You
I'll have
know,
to see what happens. So
yeah, I don't think it will replace musicians, but that's the way people are thinking, that it will, mystically, and even you'll wake up in the morning and say, I need a song to cheer me up. It'll just generate a song. I need a song for my wedding. It has to be sentimental. And, talk about a beach in Bermuda. Sure, I'll spit that out for you right now. Like, music has become a convenience. It's not like the old days when you'd have to go to get a CD or a record, and pay for it.
or an excuse to go to the bar at night.
Yeah, or the bar, right.
Depending on the venue, but eventually they started going to the bigger stages, but even still going out at night. So
Yeah, I remember like in the 90s, there was Kurzweil, pretty famous MIT, music company. And they came out with these laser disc jukeboxes. And the demo was pretty cool. I mean, for the time. And their demo song was James Brown, America. I'm like, that was an interesting song to choose. But anyway, technology will keep going. And I don't think it's always the best way, because I think the bottom line is people want convenience. And once they lose that sensibility of valuing music, they don't really care,
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't mean to be, depressed. I'm not depressed. I think it's just the truth.
Or you're either a priest or you're a philosopher, in which case people don't get depressed by either one. So,
Yeah.
so all right. But like we said, tread carefully, good soldier. So,
Thank you.
all right. But that brings you all those questions right there. So here, some just extra fun ones. Ready?
Sure.
All right. So I know I sent you 4 already, but first off, outside of music and working in software, I guess, do any other hobbies?
Yeah, my hobbies are, well, I also like to write, and I enjoy hiking.
Poetry. The poetry, yeah.
Yeah, no. And I enjoy, hiking. I'm not a world-class hiker, but I do enjoy that challenge. And, I just like being out in nature. So, for example, I went to Taos, New Mexico recently, and there's the Southern Rockies. And, I had to remember I better have bear spray and a knife. That's what the woman told me at the store. Do you have a knife too? Like I'm like going to challenge a bear or a cougar. But let me tell you, that was spectacular. And, even here in the Maine area, there are the Western Mountains, and there are the beautiful waterfalls. One's called Step Falls, and literally all these steps, and you can wade in each one, delicious mountain water, and then look out on all the mountains. I mean, what is better? So, those are my primary interests outside of this.
Oh, my next guess was a mountain lion, because I think you saw like that one video where the mountain lion just keeps looking like it's pouncing, but it's just like chasing the guy away. You're like, why did I bring a gun? So,
Yeah, right. Yeah, you don't want to tango with a bear. I even had a dream last night, which was rather disturbing, that a bear somehow was inside my house. And I think it was inspired by some dude opening his garage, coming and opening the door, and there just happens to be a bear right there inside his house. And
it just runs out. I think it ran out, or it's just this guy like hissed at him and then just ran.
Yeah, so I have an acquaintance who was hunted by a bear, and he played dead, and he could feel the nuzzle and the hot breath on his face as he played dead. So that takes a lot of self-discipline. Not
Drama.
What's it going to chew off first?
Avoid the fetal position. So, yeah.
Oh, just play dead like they don't want dead things.
Like I said, we're not scavengers. So
That's right. We're not scavengers.
yeah, it's all cool right there. So I guess I'm curious if there's a particular dish I haven't heard about yet. So I guess what you say is your favorite food.
My favorite food, my father, in Greenwich Village had restaurants, and he owned a French restaurant. And I guess my favorite foods were rather unusual, but one is beef bourguignon, which is basically burgundy, and it's kind of a kind of like a stew, but oh my god, is it delicious on egg noodles. And I like Japanese food, not all the time, but that always makes you feel clean and real.
It cleans out the digestive tract, so yeah.
Versus, the new, I stopped on the road at, Burger King, and I said, yeah, I'm really, really hungry. I'll have a triple. And the thing was the size of my head,
I should have been to Wendy's. I think they do doubles with the Burger King one. I don't think they do triple.
Yeah. It's called, cholesterol heart attack nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. Just have some onions with it.
Knock yourself out. I mean,
that's right. Knock yourself out and eat it every day, by the way. It's really good for you.
Clearly.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I had a father who was gourmet, and he would have like kidneys. Gross me out. But he made a lot of interesting concoctions. I would have to say I like steak tips. Which reveals my carnivorous nature.
My next guess was, have you thought about going vegan there, Nick?
Yeah, I was a vegetarian for 2 years. And then this holistic doctor I saw, he said, you have to stop that. If you can't survive on bulgur wheat and you're not getting enough protein, you're going to just die from anemia. And also my cousins in Florida had no tolerance, and they would just plop steaks right in front of me. So, I have to say to the animal rights people, I really did try.
It's too much. It's just not worth it. So yeah.
That's right. Yes, my daughter is a vegan, and basically like anything people do is wrong. So people can have all the judgment they want.
I guess so. But it's a good choice nonetheless. It's best being an omnivore. The omnivore is the perfect balance. So,
yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Hey, but welcome to the club. I'm an omnivore too. So.
Yeah, there you go.
There. But all great choices there. Not sure if you drink any alcohol, but if you do you have a favorite alcohol choice? If non-alcoholic choice as well?
Well, I love martinis, but humorously, I came up with a drink, and I named it something really bizarre. It's vodka with Frangelico hazelnut liqueur and some cream in a blender with raspberries. And I called it a fruit jekyll. And you know what? It's actually goddamn delicious.
I'm going to say, is this where we started trademarking the name Metapersural?
Yeah, sponsored by, Fruit Jekylls. But, I have to say, I also like, the local, chain Acapulco's. But I'll tell you, they're so-so, but their margaritas are to die for. Like top shelf and a giant pitcher of it. So, you better not be driving after you've had this, because you'll get a cop going like this to you, pull over, That's right. I mean, sir, and one time I was pulled over, I wasn't even drunk. I happened to stumble in the street in a pothole going to my car. And these two cops pulled me over and say, walk backwards. Recite the alphabet backwards. I don't even know how to do that sober.
So unfortunately, that night, Dick spent the night in a cell. So
yeah,
here I am in a ball and chain. So yeah,
that's right, a ball and chain.
So, all right. Did you say what your favorite non-alcoholic drink was? I wasn't sure that was.
Well, it'd probably be a martini.
Martini. Okay.
Yeah, dirty martini.
Oh, you dirty, rotten bastard, you.
However, I had a drink from this terrible Chinese food restaurant up in Maine. And they had, believe it or not, they can, you can take out drinks. and they give something to you that looks like it's in a plasma bottle. And it was a rotten bastard, which has got like brandy and rum and, rotten or suffering bastard. Oh my God. A lot of bang for your buck. But that's why all those people go to that restaurant, because the food is like sugar and soy sauce, but the drinks are awesome. It's always full.
That's good. But I tend to think that's how some Chinese restaurants are, though. My neck of the woods, Daly's, it's still unhealthy because it's mainly dipped in like soy sauce and like some honey in it, but it's still good nonetheless. So
yeah, whereabouts are you from?
I'm in Pittsburgh, PA.
Oh, okay, not too far.
A little bit of a drive. So
Yeah,
when I say 8-hour drive to Saratoga, I know that much. So
it's an hour to Saratoga.
8 hours.
8 hours. Yeah, that's more like it.
I was gonna say an hour. Jeez, we're not doing high speed train here, man. It would be nice. I mean,
Yes.
it would be nice. So hopefully we get to that point eventually. So, all right. I guess you got a favorite movie or TV series you recently picked up on, or had a favorite of all times between those two categories?
My favorite movie is The Shining, which I happened to see at its original showing, and the place was packed, and I was placed in the front row, far left. So the entire time I was watching the movie like this, but still it was scary. So that's my all-time favorite. Maybe this movie, it's like Room 140 or something. And it's this guy who is like a ghost hunter, and he's a skeptic, and they say, don't stay in that room, it's haunted. Turns out he never gets out of it. And it's scary as crap. And, I kind of like the oldies, like, the Twilight Zone or Thriller, just some of the old shows, mostly.
I guess what was your reaction? Go back to The Shining. I guess what'd you make with Jack Nicholson sticking his head in there, be like, "Here's Johnny."
Yeah, and a lot more going on in that movie, including being seduced by a ghoul, and kissing somebody and realizing their face is caving in. I think that's the best scene of them all, because he's so depraved. That's a great movie. Just his disintegration. And the clairvoyance too.
I guess in that case, thank God for Stephen King then. So
Yeah. There's so many great horror movies, but that's generally what I like. And then, I have like these cameras in my house, God knows why, outside and stuff like that. And one night it said, music room, motion in the music room. I'm like, yeah, like how brave am I to, it's great to know, but what are you going to do? And the best thing to do is just run.
it's either that I call the cops, or that's
Yeah.
So, all right, but all good choices there. And if I last the fun questions, I guess, what sort of music have you been listening to recently, whether it's indie or mainstream?
I tend to listen to Cali Roots a lot. So you may have heard of some of the bands like Stick Figure. There's so many. But also I was listening to this obscure punk band that it's called Joya or something like this. And they have this awesome song called Here Come the Drums. And, it's a classic punk tune. Like, you may have a rich daddy, but I don't. And you got to do what you need to survive. But it's like classic punk. Like, so I went out window shopping with a brick at 3 a.m. And the next refrain is, I went out window shopping with a crowbar. So it's definitely in your face. Like, we're not going to take it anymore. So, that stuff kind of gets me pumped up until, I watch all these old punk bands, and then I eventually say, okay, that's enough for now. I couldn't do that 24/7.
Needless to say, when he listened to Dee Snider's "We're Not Going to Take It Anymore," he was baptized at that point.
Yeah. And also strangely, the other thing I listen to is big band music, like some of the classy acts like Glenn Miller. And that might sound odd, but my tastes are like all over the place, and that's really fine musicianship, which I admire. Yeah,
Can I say musicianship? That's what I do.
musicianship.
There you go. I guess so. All right. No great choices there, Nick. All right. So, Nick, we're down to one more question in my podcast. I guess before we jump into it, would you like to ask me anything in terms of questions or say any final words before we jump into it?
No, I really appreciate meeting you today. I've had a fun time. Sometimes I feel like this is all in my head, but it's great to be on shows. I've been on other shows with, a smorgasbord of different styles. And, that's great. It's just so great to get out there and talk about music. So thank you.
This is all a dream.
It's all, hey, wait a minute. You're not awake. This is just a dream.
This is a Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Or in this case,
reality.
question reality. Or we could say the Matrix at this point. So
yeah. Well, I have a lot of synchronicity in my life, like thinking about something and then someone says it. I had a trippy thing. I'm literally talking about it, and then some old movie, the person repeats the exact same line, and I go, okay, there's more to the universe than what I understand.
It's just like, okay, just stand up and just walk away.
Yeah, that's right.
It's either that or it's like the shocked face, like, what? So,
yeah,
right, I think they get the idea. So, all right. But there's nothing else. Here's how the last question. Here's how I'll frame it. So back then, I used to frame it in around COVID because that was when the whole podcast started, and people had their struggles, or they were just totally fine with COVID since they were
the club's closed.
That whole deal, yeah. But given the amount of negativity that you have been seeing these days, whether it was because of COVID, political media, or stuff going on in the world these days, what would be your message of hope for musicians and people out there so that they can move forward with their lives?
Right. Well, I guess the message I try to convey in my music is, it's within you to have a fighting spirit. And don't be swayed because there are devilish functions out there that work to make you unhappy. And you got to recognize them for what they are. They're obstacles to your happiness. And that's part of our mission here. So, through music, you can inspire people. Sometimes it's just kick ass, get them going, and sometimes it can be meditative or trancy, but it all should be moving towards something positive. I mean, punk is great because it's rebellion. And, who says, who cares? So what? Why not? But, all in balance. I hope I didn't sound too preachy.
I was like, are you sure you're not a priest? Man, you would fit in with pretty well.
I should, yeah. Maybe that's my real calling. I could have, trance music backdrop, and give a homily.
Actually, no, you would have to be a deacon then, because since you are married, I think that's how it works. So yeah.
Yeah, deacon. Okay, well, I'll go with that.
Deacon Metapersural about to give his speech. So yeah.
I have a relation who passed, but he was a canon judge in the Catholic Church. Talk about inundated. But I don't know. I'm mentioning that. I don't think that's a life for me, really.
Depends. I mean, some people find some callings in some spot.
Yeah.
People find calling in another spot. So it happens. So, but you found the right calling too, and you also got full-time job and everything. So, all right. So, Nick, we have reached the end of my podcast right here. We're going to talk a little over an hour and 30 minutes, but I guess we close out. Got any final words? You want to give any shout-outs to anybody?
I would have to say that whoever's listening in the universe, Kraftwerk was my inspiration. German, they pioneered electronic music largely. And I have a lot of gratitude towards for their vision, just musically. And, it was so different and so, kind of trancy, but the feeling you got, it was just so new and fresh. So like just musically, that's who I'm most grateful to. If your listeners have ever heard of Kraftwerk.
Actually, in this case, I thought we were going to say, thank God for the Germans. So,
yeah. And I like a lot of the German music.
And the beer. I think the Germans got the best beer. And the beer.
And the barmaids.
And barmaids. Okay. And all them crazy, or I guess what you see in Oktoberfest, sometimes, I forget what they call it, but they do the dancing and everything. And I think it was at the Hofbräuhaus in Munich, or they would do some sort of traditional dance. I don't want to sound offensive or anything, but just trying to make sure I'm saying it right too. But they got some pretty cool traditions.
Very. Yeah.
But I say Germans are the happy drunks. UK, Scots, and Irish are usually the angry, depressed. I should say depressing. Sure. They're the angry drunks, and the Russians are the depressing drunks.
I'll stop there about my comments in that regard. Yeah.
I mean, can you try to convince me otherwise? So.
No, I think you're right about depressing.
I mean, we could also say the Italians are the wine drinkers. So.
Yeah. Well, to each their own, but
I guess so. But I guess just real quick, what's your plans for this year and onwards? I guess got some new material and you do any shows?
Yeah, so I have a few songs that I'm working on. I'm struggling right now trying to understand how much of a compromise it is to try to make it more, commonplace kind of music, like pop. And, it's almost like an equation. And I would say that maybe I would do a little bit of what you'd call alternative, meaning a little hearkening back. Some of my songs got a little bit of progressive rock in them, German progressive rock. So I might be willing to try that, which would be a departure. So
it goes back to the progressive roots, like you said.
Yeah, that's what it is. But they kind of blend together, the German techno starts to sound like some of, alternative. So, yeah, that's probably where I'd go. And also, maybe some more jazz elements, and the way I do that is I listen to old records or, I read the score and, I try to see what they're all about, 5/8 time or unusual time signatures. What jazz elements can I take in? So that sounds really ambitious. Wish me luck.
We do, Nick. So we'll see what happens. But just real quick for the audience sake, can you just list the social media and streaming platforms you're on so I can check you out?
Once more, I'm on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, like all of them. And also I have Vivo Video, which is I think it's just called Vivo. It's Metapersural Vivo, where I post my videos. And, I haven't really super marketed them, but, I think they're pretty cool, and I think people should check them out. Obviously, they have the music going with them.
That's for sure. So, all right. But to close out like this, everyone, my guest today was Nick, hailing from up there in Boston, and we have to do it because it's just set up so perfectly for the Spartan chant right there. This is Metapersural. So, yeah.
That's right. Pax Romana. SPQR.
What he said right there. So, yeah. All right. But
thank you so much.
That's the Society Music Project again. This is Metapersural. So make sure you go hit up all socials, all stream platforms, and everything. Let's go support our brother out there. And he is a software engineer, so he does say he does do some mixing and mastering, mainly within the tech world and electronic and that sort of stuff. So if he's sending him any blues or jazz stuff, there, boys. So
hey, I'll listen to it all.
He will. But I think it might cringe just based on like how it's sounding so far. So. Right. But nonetheless, he's there to help out here too. So let's go help our brother out, and he'll scratch your back too. So
Thank you so much.
no worries, Dick. So you do stay safe because you know there's one pretty messed up world out there.
That's for
Okay.
sure.
And the last thing, I just take a quick pose. Thank you.
Thank you so much.